Hey guys, in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the end of the effing world, Wonder Woman 1984, and the end of The Mandalorian Season 2. Then after that, we're going to get into the main review, which is the new Pixar film, Soul. So join us!
Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Justin, and with me as always is a man whose purpose is to talk to me about movies. Mike, how you doing?
Good. I'm so glad I found that purpose, because otherwise what would I be doing right now?
I don't know, and I'm glad it involves me because that makes me feel special.
Yeah, exactly. It's codependency, as I believe is what they call that. If this is your first time listening, normally we like to start off every episode in a section called News on the March, where we talk about film or TV news, things that we've been watching, and then we move into our feature review. This week we are reviewing the new Pixar film, Soul, which just hit Disney+.
That's right, and also here on the Casual Cinecast, every other week we put out a Casually Criterion episode. In these episodes, listeners choose a film from the Criterion Collection for us to review by voting in a poll we put out on our Twitter account. So look forward to our next Criterion poll, which will be out with our next Criterion movie. Also look back in our history for plenty of Criterion episodes. Our last one was on The Fantastic Mr. Fox. And as I mentioned before, we had a poll up to choose our next one. And Mike, if you will tell the listeners what won our last poll and subsequently what will be our next Criterion episode.
So the winner of the last poll was, I believe, your movie, which was Some Like It Hot, starring Tony Curtis, Marilyn Monroe, and Jack Lemmon. So that will be our next Criterion review. And in theory, Chris should be back for that one.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to join us back at the start of the year and start 2021 off right with all three of us back. I'm excited about that. And real quick, I just want to give a quick caveat. We did take a couple weeks off. The reason being is because I did end up having COVID, unfortunately. So I had to take a couple weeks off where I was feeling a little fatigued and also not able to come up to my office where I record the podcast and had to isolate,
So that's why we have been gone for a little bit.
Yes. And also I still have a little bit of occasional cough. So I will try to limit that throughout the episode. We'll probably edit out as many as we can. But if some of them end up in here, or if I sound funny at some point while I'm talking, that is why.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah. But otherwise, other than that, I am feeling A-okay, and as far as I know, fully recovered. So
congratulations.
No one worry.
Has your sense of taste returned?
Yeah. It was gone for about 5 days, but it returned just in time for Christmas and Christmas meals and stuff.
What did you eat during that time?
When I had no taste?
Yeah.
Some ramen, just whatever my wife felt like cooking. She would ask me, like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Just feed me healthy, like oats and paste or something that is really good for me, because it doesn't matter if it tastes bad right now.
Exactly. Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're recovered.
Thank you. And so now that that's out of the way, real quick, if you want to follow us on social media to vote in our Criterion polls or to ask us questions, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can also send us messages via email at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you like the show, you want to help other people find it, go onto iTunes or whatever platform you listen to podcasts on and give us a 5-star review and say some kind words about us. It'll help out.
Yeah, please and thank you. And with that, are we ready to go ahead and move into the next section?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, here we go. News on the March.
News on the March.
News on the March.
All right, Justin, what have you been watching while you have COVID? Had COVID?
Well, yeah, I did have a lot of downtime to myself. I didn't watch as much as I wanted to. I was pretty tired for a while there, so I didn't. I thought initially, like, oh, I'm going to be home and isolated with no work. Like, I'll watch a bunch of stuff, but I wasn't always in the mood to like watch things,
Yeah.
But I did watch one Netflix series, something I've kind of been meaning to watch because I thought it looked interesting. And I watched the first season of a show called The End of the Effing World. Are you familiar with this?
I'm familiar in the sense that I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you who's in it or what the premise is. Yeah,
there's no main actors in it. It's a British series, and it's I'll give you the quick synopsis here. It's basically about a boy and a girl. They're both 17. The boy has grown up convinced that he is a psychopath. He's like killed some animals and done some other sort of like sociopathic sort of things. And he is plotting to murder somebody. And he meets this other girl who is awkward and kind of dull emotionally as well. And they hit it off, and he decides that like she would be a good person to kill. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to ask her out and pretend to be her boyfriend and hang out with her until I kill her, basically. And he's just trying to like hang out with her and figure out when he's going to do it. That's kind of what sets everything in motion in season 1. It sort of evolves from there, but it is a dark indie comedy series that's a bit romantic.
That sounds weird.
It's super weird, and I was intrigued by that, and just I'd heard other like good word of mouth from it from other friends and other people whose opinions I trust on film stuff. And so I finally watched it, and I have to say I really liked the first season a lot. I took a little break, and I've started to dive into season 2, and so far 2 episodes into season 2, I'm not sure it's quite on the same level as season 1. But I think season 1 is certainly worthwhile, and I think kind of stands on its own. Like if there was no season 2, I would be happy.
Interesting. Okay. So how many seasons are they planning on going with this thing? Do you know?
I have no idea. I'm intended to look it up if season 2 made me want a season 3. Because season 1 didn't necessarily leave me wanting a season 2, you know?
Yeah.
But it's a pretty breezy. It's 8 episodes per season, and they're like 20-ish minute episodes. So
I didn't know Netflix really did many of the 20-minute-ish episodes. This is a Netflix thing, right?
It's here as a Netflix original series. I don't know if it aired on TV. I can't imagine that it would, because it's pretty crass. Yeah. And vulgar and violent and bloody.
Okay.
So yeah. So I can't imagine it would air on TV unless it was like on whatever would be the equivalent of HBO or something over there, or right, Showtime or something.
I think HBO is the equivalent of HBO over there.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I've never been outside of the United States, so what do I know? Yeah. But yeah, I just want to toss out a quick recommendation. I think the first season of this is a lot of fun, and
2 seasons currently, right?
Yeah, two seasons out. The second season came out in 2019, so I don't know if they've had a 3rd season planned that just got delayed because of COVID, right? Or how that is going. Okay. Maybe it ends after season 2. I'll have to let you know.
We'll keep us posted. That sounds cool. That's the end of the effing. Is it supposed to be the end of the effing world, or are you supposed to say the whole thing?
I don't know. It's started out on Netflix, and nobody ever says the name of the show in the show. The title just pops up on the screen, right? And I believe the title, when it pops up on the screen, does say fucking. Oh. So the whole thing.
We're supposed to just say the end of the fucking world, and then they just have the abbreviation just so you can actually print it and stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right.
If I remember correctly.
Cool.
But yeah, so that's it. That's my recommendation, and I'll leave it there and toss it over to Mike. What did you watch?
One of the things I have watched recently is a very large movie that came to HBO Max, the first of these big HBO Max releases that are supposed to be simultaneously in theaters, and that is Wonder Woman 1984.
Ah,
yeah.
Yes.
So have you seen the first Wonder Woman?
I have.
You have? Okay. What is your opinion of the first Wonder Woman?
I thought it was as good as the decent Marvel movies.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like,
sure. Give me a star. Ballpark out of 5.
About a 3 to 3.5.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. Like decent, but not quite as good as I had been led to believe. It's good in comparison to other DC stuff. Okay. You know.
So have you heard of the recent controversy around Wonder Woman 1984?
No, I have not.
I wasn't really following this very closely because I don't care that much about Wonder Woman, but whenever the initial reviews came in, it was certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it had an 89% or 88% tomato meter, right? Which is pretty high for a superhero movie.
Yeah, I like to call it the tomatometer, but
there you go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, whatever. So I heard it was pretty good, and then once the review embargo lifted for everyone, and everyone started to get to see it, it dropped down from like, I think like 89% to like 69%, like really rapidly. And now it seems like a lot of people are like really, really hating on Wonder Woman 1984, saying it's like a really bad movie, it's stupid, etc. And what I will say about Wonder Woman 1984 is I'm not the biggest superhero movie fan. Like, I don't own any of them. I don't really think about them until like the next one is out. Yeah. And usually I prefer like the MCU style superhero movies where there's an ongoing story and it feels like I'm watching the next episode of a TV show. The DC ones feel a little more disconnected, but I think I did like Wonder Woman more than any of the rest of them. And even though Wonder Woman 1984 is kind of being hated on right now for being corny and hokey, I honestly think it's probably better than the first one.
Oh, wow.
But that's not really saying that I would give it an enthusiastic recommendation. I still think it's probably a three-star movie out of 5. But I think what a lot of people are hating is kind of what I appreciated about this movie, which is like, did you ever, when you were a kid or recently in your lifetime, watch the Richard Donner Superman movies?
No, I've actually not seen any of them. Like,
okay.
The only Superman movie I've seen is Man of Steel and the subsequent DC movies.
That's a bummer.
I know.
Well, okay, so there's a certain amount of hokiness in Wonder Woman 1984 that I feel like superhero movies have tried to shy away from in recent years.
Yeah.
They tried to be taken a little bit more seriously, and they try to kind of rationalize their corniness in like a pseudo real world environment, you know? And I feel like Wonder Woman 1984 doesn't do that. It does a lot of what like the old school superhero movies did back in like the Richard Donner days, or maybe even like the Tim Burton Batman days, or maybe even the Sam Raimi Spider-Man days, which is to kind of be a little more hard on your sleeve. It's very corny in the sense that like it asks people to be better. Like the whole movie is sort of like a call for people to be better than they are. Like, do you remember Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2?
I only saw it once in theaters. And
right, I know the answer to that, but for the audience, I'm asking this. So
yeah,
you've seen it though, right?
I have.
And you remember the part in Spider-Man 2, spoilers for a movie that came out in like 2003 or whatever. Do you remember the part where Spider-Man saves the subway rail that's going off the tracks, you know, and then like he passes out and then all the people on the subway are like, whoa, he's just a kid, you know? And they all agree to keep his secret.
No.
Do you remember? You don't remember that at all?
No.
Okay. Well, so basically what I'm trying to say is there's a certain amount of like goodness that the movie assumes that people have. And it calls on like the everyman to do the right thing and be wholesome and good. Wonder Woman 1984 does that. It does something that like superhero movies in the MCU don't really try to do. It very much puts like the climax of the movie in the hands of like everyone and is a call for people to be better. So it's really corny, especially through a 2020 lens. But also, I think it's kind of sweet, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is it sweet in like a fantasy sort of way or in like a hopeful way?
I think it's trying to be hopeful, but it seems more corny than anything. And I think that's why people are kind of rejecting it. But I don't mind. After the year that we've had, I don't mind a movie trying to be a little corny and wearing its heart on its sleeve and trying to be old school. You know, because like what? Yeah. You know, Wonder Woman's not a serious character. We keep trying to put these like superhero characters in these really dramatically serious stories that are really not fitting to how they were sort of originally invented, you know? Yeah. Wonder Woman's a corny character, and Superman is a corny character. Like, the reason Man of Steel doesn't work and Batman versus Superman doesn't work for everyone is because he's brooding and whiny, and it's like no one really wants these characters to be that. So, I don't know. I think Wonder Woman kind of works in the sense that she's really just kind of a corny IP to begin with. You know, so I kind of like the old school approach to like the Richard Donner approach of trying to inspire kids to be good instead of just trying to make it feel real.
Yeah, I mean, that's what superheroes used to be to me, and that sort of thing was like an inspiration to be better. Yeah, and like do the right thing and for justice and that sort of thing, right? I mean, that's a big Superman thing. And so what you're saying does appeal to me. Like, it makes this movie appeal to me more than it did before, because I guess I was still expecting something, you know, a little bit more like the first Wonder Woman, which isn't quite as dark as Man of Steel. And
this is less dark than the first Wonder Woman. This is like, you know, I'm being a little more generous. There's some really stupid parts of this movie, but I don't think there's anything worse here than was in the first Wonder Woman, or for that matter, that's in like Captain America, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Cool. I might have to watch this then and give you my opinion on it.
I sound pretty positive on this movie, but I'm still sitting at a 3 out of 5 stars here.
Yeah.
It's not great, but I don't know. It's a good sit, and if you already have HBO Max, why not?
Yeah, it's also kind of just interesting that maybe the honeymoon period is over with Wonder Woman because, when the first one came out, the big thing about it was that like it was female directed and it was, a female centric superhero movie.
Right.
And I think that garnered it a lot of goodwill and people were very excited about it and very positive on it, which is maybe one of the reasons I was a little disappointed in it or expected more from it. But now that there's so much discourse about it, it seems like it doesn't quite have that goodwill that the first one did now that it's the second time around. Yeah,
no, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like people were expecting, I don't know, something big. And maybe this is a result of this being the first like summer blockbuster in a few months, like a substantial feeling blockbuster, like I don't think we've had anything really that large this year.
No, Tenet is probably the closest thing.
Tenet. And it was sort of like a trickle down release. So it didn't even have the same kind of impact that this has. So I think people were putting a lot of like unfair weight on this movie. But, I don't know. At the same time, maybe there's something to it. Maybe it's just a little too corny. But at this point in time, I'm so over the superhero movies that I would rather watch one that's trying to be shamelessly happy versus taking itself a little too seriously. And I'm looking at you, Zack Snyder, and this impending Justice League Zack Snyder cut that's coming out.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that.
But yeah, that's all I've really got to say about Wonder Woman. It's okay. It's. I don't think it's as bad as what the internet would have you believe, but it's also a sequel to Wonder Woman. So.
Yep. So sometimes you just got to see it through because you started and watched the first one.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, Chris Pine steals the movie.
He steals everything he's in.
That's true. Although he's a charming fellow. Yeah, but anyway, okay,
cool.
That's it. Should we talk about The Mandalorian Season 2 now?
Yeah, now that it's finished, we got to wrap up our, periodic discussion of this series.
Yeah, okay. So why don't you go ahead and kick it off? What do you think of The Mandalorian Season 2? Are you looking forward to the future? What do you think? Go on.
Yeah, I'm totally looking forward to the future because I thought Season 2 of Mandalorian was excellent in terms of Star Wars, and that's not a knock to say that Star Wars isn't great and this is good in comparison. Like I genuinely love a lot of Star Wars out there, but this is, top shelf, cinema or TV Star Wars. And especially compared to the first season, if you had asked me that question at the end of the first season, I would have said, it's pretty good. I enjoy it. It's tangential to the things I love the most, but now season 2 is right up there as it starts to incorporate and connect to the other films and other characters from the TV shows and the books like we've talked about before. As it starts to bring in more of that, it just gets more and more exciting to me and feels more and more Star Wars-y,
Yeah, it feels like, in a sense, that the Mandalorian TV show is like tying together all 3 trilogies as well as like the extended material in a way that no other Star Wars material has tried to do so far.
Yeah, and that's really enjoyable, and it's just been a good journey as I've grown more attached to Mando and Grogu and even some other characters who maybe I didn't care that much for in season 1.
Yeah,
I start to like them more and more, and they get more fleshed out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think another thing that's interesting about that is a lot of Mandalorian Season 2 has revolved around characters kind of entering the story and then disappearing for a while and entering back in again. It's almost like there's a new face every week. Some of them from the books, some of them from the TV shows. But, I heard about a lot of these cameos before Season 2 even aired. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering to myself, I was like, is this going to take away from what makes The Mandalorian so different, how it feels separate from everything else? And I think what works about season 2 is there are a lot of cameos and they steal the scenes, they steal the show for a minute. But all of these characters that enter the fray and leave and come back, so far, they have all been relevant to the story and they've all been building our main character, the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. They've been building his character. You could bring in Bo-Katan from the cartoons and that could distract from Mandalorian for a while because it's Katie Sackhoff and it's a cartoon character coming to life. But they bring in Bo-Katan for a reason that that challenges him and pushes his character forward and makes him challenge his creed. And, they bring in Ahsoka, this character from the cartoons, which is like the Star Wars character from the cartoons, like the main cartoon character so far. And she didn't steal the show because it makes sense because they needed her to learn more about the baby.
Yeah, it feels like part of the plot.
So far, it seems like it's all been really planned out in a sense to where like you're introducing these new characters, but it never takes over the show and becomes something else.
Yeah, I think maybe the closest we get to that is Boba Fett. Not when he first appears, because I think we see him in like one shot early on in the season, but in the episode where he actually shows up and starts beating up people, like I think that episode is that feels like the Boba Fett episode to me.
Yeah, most of the screen time is dedicated towards him. But even then, a lot of this is challenging our main character's perception of what it means to be a Mandalorian.
Yeah. It all has an appropriate effect on it, as opposed to just characters coming in and out and Mando not changing too much, which, maybe that's what makes this season feel so much more satisfying and better than the first season. Not to knock the first season, it was entertaining, Well,
it sets everything up for the second season to be able to just knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
Because you spend so much time in that first season talking about the helmet thing and how he can't take the helmet off, and then this season, although that's not the focus of the season, you can really feel like the main character becoming sort of a more worldly and more well-rounded guy.
Mm-hmm.
The show's called The Mandalorian, and at first I was thinking, okay, that's a very much like an homage to like the Virginian, these old Western titles, very pulpy, very serialized, and I think it is. But I think the title The Mandalorian is going to be sort of like an implication of where the story is going to go, especially now that the baby's not going to be in the story as much, right?
Yeah, and he, correct me if I'm wrong, is he even technically a Mandalorian? Or was he just rescued by?
So, yeah, well, he's rescued by, but he's a, quote, foundling.
Yeah.
They consider foundlings to be... So deep dive here real quick. So, he is a member of the Child of the Watch, right? That's what he's called. The Child of the Watch is what Bo-Katan says. And Death Watch is basically the people that saved him in season 1. Death Watch is a clan of Mandalorians that try to embrace the older way. And Bo-Katan used to be a member of them back in the Clone Wars cartoon. And she and the Watch are partly responsible for Darth Maul coming in and taking over Mandalore for a little bit with the Darksaber. Since then, Bo-Katan's kind of cleaned up her act and sort of tried to become like a quote-unquote good guy. But she used to be part of the Watch, and the Watch are very much like an extremist group of Mandalorians, very much into like violence and war. And that's what Din Djarin is an offshoot of. He's like an offshoot of an offshoot.
Gotcha.
Bo-Katan seems to like acknowledge him as a Mandalorian, even though she was born on Mandalore. She doesn't seem to dispute him when he says that he's a Mandalorian. So I think she would consider him to be one, even though he wasn't technically born on Mandalore. And I think where the show's going is he's going to ultimately prove to be the best person to lead Mandalore, even though he wasn't technically born there and he's just a foundling. I think he's going to be he's going to be the Mandalorian, capital T,
Yeah, but that's why I think like the show sort of gives that title a second or deeper meaning, you know what I mean? Like something a little bit more to interpret it, because he isn't naturally born.
Right. I think season 3 is going to very much be Bo-Katan versus Din Djarin. Maybe not in an outright battle, but I think Bo-Katan's going to have to come to terms with maybe that she's not the best ruler.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, lots of cool places it could go now that the Grogu is out of the picture. But also, how long do you think Disney's going to let them not have Grogu?
I think it's going to be a couple episodes. Like my prediction is
not a whole season?
I don't think so. I think what will happen is that we'll have a few episode arc of whatever's going on with Mando. It'll be somewhere in the future, some time where Grogu has had some training with Luke, and Mando will be in a tight spot a few episodes in, and Grogu will somehow come in and like save the day with his, more honed and trained Jedi skills.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think he's going to be a member of Luke's Jedi Academy or whatever. I think he's going to learn the bare minimum and then go back to our main character.
To Mando. Yeah, I think so. And then we'll have the rest of the season with them, and we'll get a little bit more of the stuff that's in like Lone Wolf and Cub and Shogun Assassin, the, you know, like the inspirational stuff for Mandalorian, like where the baby is actually helping and and playing
like,
a bigger
the
part.
baby will kill a few people.
Yeah, which sounds fun.
Yeah, hit a trap or something and watch them all die.
Yeah,
that would be an interesting part of Lone Wolf and Cub that they haven't really adapted yet in the show. It's like, you know, having his little floating baby cart have booby traps in it and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also wonder if they would leave the baby separate from Mando for a whole season, let the Mando do his own thing, taking back Mandalore, doing all that, and then maybe not necessarily have the baby like absent from the audience, but maybe absent from the Mandalorian, because we know there's going to be 2 spinoffs, or 3 spinoffs if you count the Boba Fett one. And I think it's possible that Luke and Ahsoka could meet. Although I don't know if they're going to keep de-aging Mark Hamill. I think they're going to have to recast Luke if they keep making Luke a part of things.
Yeah, that was super cool from like a narrative perspective, but from an effects perspective, I thought the seams kind of showed pretty hard. Yeah,
it's weird. I watched it on 2 different TVs. I watched it on my TV the first time, and I don't want to say it looked perfect, but I didn't know it was like a deep faked Mark Hamill. I thought it was like another actor, and because it didn't quite look like Mark Hamill completely.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is this? And I was expecting like Sebastian Stan or a recast or something. So the first time I didn't quite pick up on the fact that it was like a CGI deepfake. But then I watched it again on a different screen, like on my phone. And I was like, holy crap, this looks terrible.
Yeah, I was somewhere in between. Like I kind of had to just ignore it and go with it to enjoy it overall, because, you know, it was working really well from the time that like I picked up that like, oh, this is Luke, basically from the moment we see like his X-Wing, right?
And what a good build-up, right?
Yeah, and you know, you're seeing him from the camera angle, and you're not getting a look at the face, and it's just this hooded figure, you know, with the green lightsaber going through, smashing up dark troopers. And, you know, at some point in there, you know, I'm like, okay, it's Luke. Yeah, that's super cool. And I was very into it. And it just, I had to work a little bit to stay with that mood, you know, when you actually see his face and see him actually talking and stuff.
Sure. And, you know, I think going forward, if I had to guess about it, they will probably recast. But I think they wanted to give Mark Hamill one last, you know, moment in the sun.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I would be fine with a recast, because I do think it would be cool if we spent a whole season sort of cross-cutting between what Mando's doing and Grogu training.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like I don't want to just read about whatever Luke and Grogu get up to in some book that they write, you know?
Right.
Which I'm sure there will be plenty of like side material that will include like the adventures of Luke Skywalker and Grogu. That's just printing money. But I don't think we're going to get that in live action unless they recast Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyways, but yeah, going forward, I'm excited. I think by the way, what do you think of that end scene with Bib Fortuna getting fat and then Boba Fett going back to Jabba's palace and all that?
I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I think I think it was fun to see Jabba's palace rebuilt again.
Yeah, and I'm still like chaining up women, so they haven't learned anything in all these years. No progression.
Yeah, well, Fennec Shand seemed to put it into that.
No gender politics have progressed in Jabba's
not
palace.
on Tatooine. Yeah, not in Jabba's palace.
Maybe that'll happen.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. Anything else about The Mandalorian you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
As far as I'm concerned, they could just stop making Star Wars movies and just give us this stuff. Like, serialized content, I think, is what Star Wars really lends itself to.
Yeah, because I think so.
I think if you break down the plot of Season 1 and Season 2 of The Mandalorian and you cut out a bunch of action sequences, you have the rough structure of a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
All 8 episodes of Season 1, if you trimmed it down, could be about a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
Not that I think you should do that, but what I'm saying is, like, you don't need to have a whole lot of story to make, like, a weekly Star Wars show feel full, I guess. You know what I mean? It can be pretty pulpy and minimal on story, and just as long as you keep pumping money into it, I think it works, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. I would be happy with that, too.
I think Jon Favreau kind of understands the minimalized Western style of storytelling and knows how to kind of milk it out and make it not feel too slight week to week to where it's too frustrating to continue. But yeah, okay. Are we ready for Soul?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's talk about it.
All right. So now moving into our feature review for Disney and Pixar's new film Soul.
What the? What is this place?
What's your name, honey?
I'm Joe. I teach middle school band. Got it, go for it! Today started out as the best day of my life.
Back here tonight, first show's at 7.
Yes! Woohoo! You know what that's gonna say? Joe Gardner. I did it. I got the gig.
Must have been sudden for you.
What? Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Help! I'm not done! Oh my goodness! Huh? Is this heaven?
No, it's the great before. This is where new souls get their personalities, quirks, and interests before they go to Earth.
All right, so as always with our new films, we will be doing a spoiler-free section up front. We'll be giving our general thoughts and impressions without spoiling anything. So if you haven't seen Soul yet, you can continue to listen. We'll give you a warning and play a little bumper so that you have plenty of time to pause the podcast before we get into spoilers and go watch Soul, and then you can come back and finish listening.
All right. Soul was directed by Pete Docter and Kemp Powers. It stars Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, and Graham Norton. The IMDb synopsis says, a musician who has lost his passion for music is transported out of his body and must find his way back with the help of an infant soul learning about herself. I don't think that synopsis is accurate. I don't think he has lost his passion for music at all.
Yeah, that's true. That is.
He's annoyingly obsessed with it the whole movie, actually. So
yeah,
that's an
it's
inaccurate
quite
synopsis.
the opposite of that. He's refused to give up on his passion for music.
I give that synopsis a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, not great. I also, I think the director's name is Pete Docter and Kemp Powers. I give a 5 out of 5 because they sound like fake names.
Yeah.
That are really cool.
Yeah, Pete Docter is a pretty cool name.
So is Kemp Powers. I mean,
yeah, it sounds like the Kenny Powers from the fucking Eastbound and Down. Like the what's the actor's name? Help me.
Danny McBride.
Danny McBride. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. Like when I first saw it pop up on the credits at the end of the movie, I was like, Kenny Powers. Oh wait, no, Kemp Powers, because sometimes an M looks like 2 N's.
Exactly, and that's not a person you want to be reminded of.
Not after a Disney Pixar movie.
All right, so Justin, what were your thoughts on Soul? Does it live up to the high standards that Pixar has put down previously, or I don't know, where does this fall for you?
Well, I mean, to me, just simply put, yeah, I think it does live up to the higher standard of Pixar movies, at least the ones that are of a higher standard, because they've certainly let me down in other places before and done things like Cars 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. You know, and Incredibles 2, you know, which nothing against some of those movies that I enjoy, but like they're not on the same level as some of the more original properties, things like Up or WALL-E or Coco, things that aren't necessarily just entertaining and for kids, but have some deeper existential questions and lessons and stuff that I think is important. And especially to me, I mean, I think it's cool that they're making kids movies that get you thinking about these sort of things and asking these kind of questions. And
right.
On that level, Soul to me certainly lives up to it.
Yeah. Well said. I agree with that. What do you think of Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey?
I think they were both really great in it. That's not a thing I say about Jamie Foxx.
I was about to say, you're not the biggest Jamie Foxx fan, so that's actually good to hear.
Yeah. So I was impressed. I think that even knowing that it was him, I was not consciously thinking that it was him the whole movie, right? And I could very easily see not knowing who was voicing anybody in this movie, except for maybe Tina Fey. Her voice I'm very familiar with.
You know what, though? That's the one I had the hardest time pegging her voice. Tina Fey?
Really?
Yeah, like,
oh, wow.
Like I'm very familiar with Tina Fey. I think Tina Fey's hilarious.
Sure.
Yeah, but like for some reason, I just did not connect the dots for Tina Fey. I knew it was someone I knew, you know?
Right, yeah. But I think everybody just kind of blends into this and really becomes their character. Like I wouldn't, hold it against anybody who couldn't pick out who the voices were.
Yeah.
I mean,
think
especially
there's some
beyond
really
Jamie
inspired
Foxx.
voices too. Like all the Jerrys, I think, were really great, and then Terry. Terry, the voice of Terry, I actually had to look up because I wasn't sure if it was a man or a woman or what was going on. Like the counter,
I don't
Terry,
know. Yeah, who was the voice of him?
I forgot. Rachel something, I think was her name. But yeah, it was a woman.
Oh wow, I did not realize. I mean, it was kind of genderless, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know that. I could have sworn it was a man, but I don't mean that in the mean way. I think the voice was great.
Yeah, it was a great voice, and I think one of the Jerrys was Richard Ayoade from like the IT Crowd.
Yeah.
And
also in Mandalorian.
Oh yes, yeah, he was. Is that kind of robotic drone sometimes that is really funny.
Yeah, so I think I am not too far off from you. I don't think I'm as high on it as you are. This is probably on the same par as Inside Out. Like
That's one I haven't seen yet, but
okay,
I've heard people say, compare them.
Yeah, this feels the most like Inside Out. Actually, Pete Docter is responsible for Inside Out and Up and Monsters, Inc. That's a pretty strong lineup. Of all of those, Inside Out's my least favorite, but it's very similar to Soul in the sense that it deals with like existential questions in a way that most kids' movies don't even attempt to do. And for that, I'm grateful to them, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of adult movies don't ask these questions.
Yeah, a lot of adult movies have just become kids' movies rated PG-13.
Yeah, with some swearing.
Yeah, with some swearing and a little bit more violence. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And that's one of the things, that I haven't really let sink in as much until I was watching this film was, how much this film is making me think existentially, think about things in life, evaluate my own life in ways that a lot of mainstream movies don't, and in ways that we often spend time on this podcast complimenting Criterion films for, I had a lot of the same feelings and self-evaluation that I had when we reviewed things like Seventh Seal or Tokyo Story.
Right. Yeah.
And I haven't quite connected those dots that these films from Pixar, more than most other modern films, or at least modern like mainstream blockbuster type films.
Yeah.
They're giving me that itch, and or they're scratching that itch, I should say. They're not giving me the itch.
And and even though I'm not as high on it as you are, I can see the value in what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. Like I think Soul has more to say than like the entire MCU. If you put all the MCU movies together to say something, Soul is saying more in its like little finger than the MCU is saying in its entire breadth,
Yeah. And that's what I really like about it. Like, I don't know that if you strip that away and look at it on a story level, I honestly think it's maybe a little hard to imagine a kid being into this.
Right. Yeah.
It's about an old guy who wants to play piano and jazz music.
Yeah, I was about to say, that said, I think this movie will appeal more to adults than it will children.
Yeah.
Kids would rather watch Zootopia or one of the MCU movies that I just mentioned before they would probably want to watch this.
Yeah. And the crux of this movie is an older man, who
a middle-aged
dude
is in his having 50s. A midlife crisis.
Yeah. I mean, I would say beyond middle age, definitely over the hill, I felt like.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, he had like gray hair and stuff. I felt like he was, late 40s, early 50s.
I would say, I guesstimated about 40.
Okay. All right, fair enough. We'll split the difference and say 45. But it's about a character looking back on his life and evaluating it. And I think that, at least in moments, it's like that. And that's where maybe some of the most powerful stuff in the movie happens. But like, I don't know that a kid would relate to that. Like, I don't know that I would have related to it as hard at 20.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think a lot of these movies, you appreciate them as you get older. But the thing is, like, they're not what you would have appreciated years ago. Mm-hmm. I think when you were a kid, you probably would have preferred like A Bug's Life or Cars or Toy Story 4 over something like this or WALL-E, Yeah,
I think that's definitely true.
Like, I think as you get older, movies that really swing for stuff like this are very much more appreciated.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, because there are sections of this movie that I wasn't as into story-wise, but as soon as they would get to the themes of the film and some of the emotional resonance and character development in those parts, my ears kind of perked up a little bit more, and I got more interested. So, I don't think this is a perfect movie, because I think there are, segments of it that are just okay.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it moved me and it made me think, and it's still making me think and inspiring in a way to be a better person, or to think about life in a different way, which is powerful.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
There are sections of this film where, I felt like maybe it is a little undercooked when we are in the afterlife segment or pre-life segments or, whatever, the other plane. You actually see a lot of characters as like souls before and after life. And all of that, I feel like maybe could have been a little more creative. It feels sort of like they wanted to be this non-offensive, non-denominational nowhere land. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that.
And I don't know. That to me felt a little blah. But when they get on Earth, all the sections on Earth, I think, are actually quite interesting. But, I was talking to someone who I watched the movie with, and they were saying that actually they felt like the environments were maybe a little bit like whenever they're in the city, the environments are maybe a little too realistic for how cartoony the characters look. And I've often felt that way in other movies as well. Like, for example, like Frozen 2, I think felt that way, where it's like we're starting to get to a point where the animation is so good and so photorealistic that you start putting in like the animated character models that are supposed to be really cartoony. And I feel like they don't necessarily jive as well as they could.
Yeah, there's definitely a different, obviously less photoreal texture to the character's skin and the hair than the rest. But my wife and I were actually commenting on that during the movie. There's some shots, later on that don't involve people, that involve shots of like the city and an apartment and that
real,
sort of
right?
thing. And you're looking at it like, that is that real? I don't know. Like, so I can understand that feeling. Where I would disagree, I actually think that the afterlife and like other realm stuff is the most interesting part of the movie. The parts that was like, for me, really working and kind of firing on all cylinders. But I can understand your issue that it feels undercooked. But to me, I thought the beauty of it was in the simplicity.
Right. Like maybe humans are the ones assigning all this denomination to everything, right? Like this, these rules and these yada, yada, yada. But really, we all come from the same bland nowhere-ness.
Yeah. And I think it left some things to, or it left the ability to focus on what's going on with the characters and not get too like bogged down in details of this afterlife. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do think in its own simple way, like it was really cool looking and a lot of the stuff was really, really inventive in its simplicity of like creating these worlds that to me were like fun to look at, especially, well, I can't get into too much of, but initially when he, this isn't a spoiler, but when he goes into the afterlife initially, that's a very simple rendering of that space of like this sort of like galaxy looking space with like a very simple sort of treadmill like thing that just is black with white lines. It's like
the afterlife through the eyes of like the Apple Store.
Yeah. It's very simple and sleek. And to me, like all of that stuff was like very visually appealing. And I enjoyed just looking at it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I just kind of, maybe I was hoping for a little bit more in the afterlife, like a little bit more exploration of that. I feel like I agree. We only see like the conveyor belt going to like the great beyond, which we never see the other side of, and then we see like the before you're born, like nursery area, right? And we never see any other areas. And I don't know, maybe I wanted a little bit more exploration of that world. Like it felt like we were almost going to like Bill and Ted land for a minute, And I kind of wanted to see like the silly rules to this afterlife. And it seems like they just kind of wanted to skirt around that altogether. And I don't know, I just kind of would have appreciated a little bit more commitment to something there.
Yeah, that's maybe my greatest disappointment in the film is that I enjoyed that world so much that I did want more of it and felt like I could have spent more time there and like dove into more story there.
Yeah, and I felt like I could have used a little bit more clarity on like the spark that happens at the end, right? And we'll get into more of that in the spoilers here in a couple of minutes. But like the conclusion, right, that our main character arrives at, I find to be a little muddy.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So we'll definitely get into it.
Okay, good. So I say we move into spoilers real quick. I'm sitting at Still a 3 out of 5, but you know what? Time could boost it up to 3.5. Like, it is better than, I think, Onward. It's better than Cars. You know, it's better than the Tiniest Dinosaur, or whatever the hell that movie's called.
The Good Dinosaur?
The Good Dinosaur. Yeah, you know, so it's by no means bottom tier Pixar. And it feels too thoughtful to be middle of the road Pixar. But I don't love it as much as I want to.
Yeah, okay. Well, we are pretty far off then because I thought we were a little closer, you know, just because we're both kind of complimentary about it. But if you're at, you know, a 3, maybe a little higher, I'm kind of sitting between like a 4 and maybe a 4.5.
Nice. I like it.
So I really liked it a lot, and I highly recommend it.
Awesome. I think you should watch Inside Out.
I want to, and I've wanted to forever.
Conversation.
Yeah, I've been told the same thing by some other people I've talked to about the film today. They're like, "Oh, if you like that, like you got to watch Inside Out." I think so. Yeah, it's on my list.
I await your thoughts on that movie because I think Soul and Inside Out are the closest together of all the Pixar movies, like the way they feel.
Yeah.
Right now, I think I like Soul a little better, but Inside Out's like neck and neck with it as far as like. Just like the thoughts and like the feelings that it makes me feel, the existential questions and so on. The creativity in sort of like another realm of existence. I think if you liked that in this movie, I think you would love that in Inside Out.
Yeah, totally. And the person who recommended Inside Out to me, they referred to Soul as Diet Inside Out.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was kind of their opinion on it. And you said you like this one better. So that's interesting. I got to I got to break the tie.
I know. It'll be interesting to see. I wouldn't want to live on the difference, though. It's splitting hairs on Soul and Inside Out. But, okay. Spoilers?
Spoilers. Let's go.
Let's do it.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
You know what cigarettes you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Okay, so before we got into spoilers, I had kind of mentioned offhanded that I thought maybe the conclusion that our main character arrives at by the end of the film felt a little underwhelming, undercooked, a little muddy, I think is the word I used. So, I don't know, the spark, the whole thing with the spark, where, you know, the whole time he thinks that that's like your purpose in life, right? That if you don't have a spark, you don't have a purpose.
Yeah, so it'd be something like music or,
right,
you know,
music
painting
or you know, like art,
cooking,
painting, football, whatever, right?
Haircutting.
Yeah. Whatever you think you're good at and then are passionate about. And then later it seems like he discovers that the spark is just liking to be alive. I don't know. What?
I took it as the spark was ready to live life. Like ready to live. Because that's what they need to go to Earth. And that's what the girl couldn't have because she was basically convinced that Earth was terrible and she was afraid of life going poorly for her. And like, you know, she makes the statement at some point in the movie of souls can't get crushed here. That's what happens on Earth.
Right.
And so she was like afraid to live life and needed to be ready for it more so than just excited about life.
Right. I guess where it felt underwhelming for me is our main character's journey, right? Like his journey was to make it, realize that in making it, he's not as happy as he thought he would be. And then realizing, going into the zone and then kind of realizing that maybe the spark wasn't what he thought it was. I don't know. It felt a little underwhelming for our main character, I guess, in a certain sense. I would have liked maybe a couple scenes of him like preparing to die, right? Like it seems like he got his life back, didn't say goodbye to anybody or make any kind of arrangements, but then it was just like, you know what? Now that I've played that show, I don't need to say goodbye to my mom. You know, I don't know. It just felt a little weird. Like it felt rushed. It felt like he turned a new leaf really quickly. I don't know. I wanted to explore a little bit more of these ideas, and I feel like it's trying to breeze past a lot of these ideas and trying to get to the moral and the heart of the whole story, which is ultimately good.
Yeah. So I had some initial disappointment too immediately because I think I started to build these expectations as I was watching the movie of, he thinks that he needs to be this professional musician and his purpose is music. And I kind of got this idea in my head that maybe he was going to realize that his purpose was actually teaching and being inspirational and being like a mentor.
Yeah.
Like, his purpose in life is to like inspire others. And maybe that's like all of our purposes, right?
Sure.
Something to that effect, something that was a little bit more concrete.
Right. Well, like throughout the movie, they mention Lisa, this character Lisa that he used to date. And they mention teaching and all this stuff. And at the end, the conclusion he arrives at is like maybe the things that I wasn't paying attention to as closely as I should have mean more to me than I thought they did. And it's not all about jazz. Jazz just kind of is like the flavoring on an otherwise full life that I didn't appreciate,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right.
I do too. But here's the thing. I would have liked maybe a scene with Lisa prior to that. I would have liked a scene of him teaching and maybe being good at it, but dispassionate about it, But instead, we don't really get any of the, we get them mentioned throughout the movie a couple times, but like I would have liked to seen him in the relationship with Lisa in a flashback or something, being kind of bored, and like missing what was right in front of him all along. If that's the conclusion he's going to arrive at the end. I would have liked a little bit more show, don't tell about, because it seems like, it's all about jazz. That's the only bit of like this guy's life we get to see are all jazz related and people talking to him about being obsessed with jazz and then being somewhat relieved when he talks about other stuff. I would have liked that, like that barbershop scene, like an equivalent of that, but with Lisa that they keep mentioning, or with, like the scene when he starts thinking about life, he like visualizes his like feet in the sand on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked maybe a flashback of him at the beach and then like recontextualizing these things where like the first time he was bored because he was thinking about jazz, but this time he realizes it was what he should have been appreciating all along. Does that make sense?
But I think what you're describing, we do get, granted it isn't focused around some lost love, but I think that makes, would muddy the point of like, if you're too obsessed with one thing, you're missing out on a lot of other stuff, like I don't think it needs, or I wouldn't want it to accidentally become about a lost love that he missed out on.
No, not
the jazz,
a lost love, but the things that he, at the end of the movie, when he starts to realize like the meaning, when he's in the zone, right? He starts like
playing
having
the piano, and reminiscing.
He starts to realize all the things that like his life was full. He lived it. It was great. He just didn't see it at the time. But we didn't see any of that from his perspective earlier. All these scenes we're seeing for the first time in his realization that they weren't so bad. So I'm just saying, I think it would have been a little better maybe to like plant those seeds a little stronger at the beginning, more than just like the name of a girl that you broke up with and like, like the montage of not necessarily don't make it about lost love, but like all the stuff that he learns to appreciate at the end. I think the seeds could have been planted a little earlier in the beginning and like, and show us seeing him not appreciating these things.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying. I think I'm a little torn on that idea because one of the things that I did like about it was how it didn't necessarily get on the nose or like preachy about any one thing, right?
Like any one element.
Yeah, because the film to me makes the point that your obsession can be many different things and it can take all of these forms. It can be something positive like being really great at jazz and loving jazz and that's what you want to do with your life and you miss out on X, Y, and Z because of it. But you can also, I think the film kind of hints at and shows that like that can also be a cell phone without beating you over the head about it.
Right.
It could also be anxiety or like messages that you tell yourself, like self-deprecating things of like, I'm just not good at X, Y, and Z, even though I want to do it, I'm not good enough.
Right.
Like there are all of these sort of different interpretations of what you can be obsessed with, like a dead end job or something like that, or whatever with like the money manager guy. Yeah. But, what I like is sort of the vagary and not getting so specific because I don't know, that's one of those things that allows me to insert myself.
Sure.
And think about it think about it in this abstract way without feeling like the movie's preaching a very specific point to me. I can come away with more of my own lesson than like feeling like I've experienced this character's journey and that's maybe moving but doesn't quite connect with me as much. So I understand what you're saying, because I felt that too, but I think as I get away from it, I appreciate some of the vagueness and simplicity in that.
Yeah, and you know what, this, as we're talking about this film, I'm reminded of another film that I know you love quite a bit, and it's almost like the antithesis of that movie, right? And I'm thinking of La La Land. So if you don't want to hear about the comparison, if you haven't seen La La Land, maybe skip ahead like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
What I think is so brilliant about La La Land and also the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, but specifically La La Land, is what it'll do is it kind of goes through the what if scenario where you get to see it play out, right? We get to see the if I had done things differently decision play out in a fantasy realm, even if it's not a realistic portrayal of what would have happened. We see the character's inner thoughts in a way that is put on screen to where we have no doubt what is in her head, you know?
Right.
About what could have been, what might have been had things just gone a little differently. And in that film, I think a conclusion that a couple of the characters come to is that your dreams are your dreams, and those are the most important things possible. You got to go for them, sometimes at the risk of being happy in ways that would otherwise be like a concession or a consolation prize, you know?
There's sacrifice.
Right, there's sacrifice to achieving your dreams.
Yeah.
This film seems to be like maybe not necessarily the opposite, but in the sense that like if you don't achieve what you think is your dream, that's okay. Sometimes it's the journey, the little things along the way. Not everyone can be the best at what they do. Not everyone can make it that way. And sometimes that's okay. The journey along the way is what matters, and that's what makes you who you are, and that's etc.
Yeah.
And if that's the conclusion we're going to go to, I would have liked maybe to see a little bit of the life outside of the thing that he didn't make it doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair.
So I thought that was interesting. A nice comparison to La La Land. I think both are dealing with kind of similar ideas.
Yeah.
And yeah, I appreciate both of them, but I like the La La Land approach to this more. This idea that if it's going to be like the road not traveled, then
I
show
think
me the
so.
road.
I mean, there's something a little bit more impactful about the seeing regret versus seeing hope, you know?
Sure.
Something that sticks with you a little bit more. I think La La Land is, you know, I like that movie better. Not that they're
they don't need to compete.
Super comparable.
Yeah.
But
they don't need to compete. I'm just
about.
comparing them because they reminded me of each other in their themes.
Yeah, and they're both jazz heavy.
Oh, yeah, they're a good call. So, yeah, in the sense that you got to go through life and then improv when you need to.
Yeah, and unless we have anything else to touch on with like the end, do you have anything else with that?
No, I've said my piece.
Cool. So I did want to talk about what we talked about a little bit earlier too, before spoilers, was for me, I thought the section where the film lagged the most and felt maybe a little bit average was when he goes into the cat and she goes into him and we end up back in New York. Like it's fun and I enjoyed that part, but I thought like that sort of like hijinksy section of that was where the movie lost me a little bit.
See, I thought it was going to be that for me. And I was like, oh, here we go. Fish out of water, switch bodies, yada, yada, yada. But I think the scene that really, like my favorite scene in the movie, actually. The scene that
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
The barbershop?
Yeah.
Yeah. What a scene, right? That's a good scene.
Yeah, that turns it around for me. And that's one of those things that like I mentioned when we talked about, like it lagged, but then there were these moments of where the themes come in during that really pick it up. And that's one of the best scenes.
What's so good about that scene is you're seeing both characters learn something simultaneously, right? You're seeing both characters kind of come alive in a way that you haven't seen either of them do previously.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good all through the guise of this charade they're putting on, you know, where she's loosely pretending to be him and he's a cat, you know, and like I don't know, I think that is like using a gimmick that is there to make little kids laugh and make slapstick humor. That's taking a gimmick up to like the next level and like exploring what you can do with that gimmick from a character perspective, right? And I think, to me, that's the scene in the movie where I was like, you know what? Maybe this movie is really good. And just a little bit more of that, I think, would have been great. Like this idea of him being completely powerless to do anything. Like another scene that I think was like right there with it was the scene where he tells 22 what to say to his mom. Mm-hmm. And he gets to see the mom accept him, but like an out-of-body experience, right? He gets to see someone else experience this acceptance and this hug, but he still feels it. You know, it's still him saying the words, right? But he gets to witness it from a third-party perspective in a way we never get to do when someone's giving us compliments or someone's telling us they love us, you know? Or when someone's trying to, like, look out for us. So he gets to kind of, like, take a step back and really see his mom the way she sees him, you know? And I don't know. I think that whole segment was really beautiful as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the barbershop definitely gives what you were saying you wanted more of. So that is one example of, I think, like the movie really working. So maybe more of that would have been good, you know.
Just maybe one or two more scenes of like him really understanding that there's more to life than jazz, you know. Like I want to see him understand that with connections that he's had in his life.
Yeah. And the mom scene, I do want to say what I really enjoyed was just they do this from time to time, I think, but this is the most effective example. But I enjoyed how they kind of seamlessly switch between voices. You know, they switch from him having Tina Fey's voice most of the time. Yeah. And the camera pans behind the mom. And then as it reveals him again, it switches over to Jamie Foxx's voice.
Yeah, it's really good.
And that was really good, like filmmaking and use of doing that without explaining it and having it just make sense and work and be really impactful. Yeah. It's, you know, especially to remind us, because I think we can forget in that moment that we're so used to hearing Tina Fey's voice that we forget that like he doesn't.
Yeah, what he looks like to everyone else.
To everyone in the universe.
Yeah, and even as like cliche and as standard as it is, I still like the shots whenever it cuts to someone else's perspective and you see the cat freaking out.
Yeah, yeah. And he's just meowing like crazy.
Yeah, I will say, and this is something that the person I was watching it with said as well. I'm not a big fan of the cat character design. Not as cute as it could have been.
Yeah, it's real
schlubby
like
looking
Garfield
cat.
And fat kind of.
Yeah,
lumpy.
Yeah, not particularly cute cat.
No, I enjoyed it well enough. I mean, if the cat was too cute, we wouldn't want him to leave the
That's
body.
True.
We'd be like, oh, is the cat dead now?
It would be a real Grogu situation.
Yeah, I did think it was pretty funny. I enjoyed when he ends up in the cat. Like we cut to the shot on the conveyor belt going to the great beyond, and it's just that cat sitting there.
Yeah, the cat soul.
Yeah, the cat soul. Like,
yeah, that was
looking
good.
uneasy.
That was good.
That was good. There's some other really funny stuff. I enjoyed the end whenever they're like, "Oh, you can go back to your life now. We'll give you another chance." And they go. Richard Ayoade's Jerry goes up and distracts Terry. He's like, "Quick, Terry, look over there, quick, immediately."
Yeah. Terry was probably, I don't know, more Terry. This movie could have used, I think.
Yeah, a little bit more antagonism. I did enjoy the design of how he moved through the real world.
Yeah, the lines, like that was really cool.
Coming off of like the walking man on the street sign, or like the modern art painting, like being made out of lines of that. I thought that was cool. And I think maybe the movie does get a little muddy in some places, because I do think like him going down to Earth, and they make a big deal saying you can't be seen by anyone, and he does. And then to my recollection, there's no consequences from that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So there are some like loose threads hanging. But that's not what the movie does for me. It doesn't entertain me as much as it moves me and makes me think.
One thing I think this movie does really well, and that is actually the music scenes, right? The actual jazz scenes. Jazz is something that, if you're going to animate jazz too intricately, it feels like that might defeat the purpose of jazz altogether, because jazz is all about improv and feeling and going with it. And the idea of animating something so intricately and so meticulously, I thought might have a counterproductive feel. to what jazz is, you know? But I will say that, like, when watching some of the jazz scenes in this film, like when he's on stage and he's playing with his hero that he's been trying to, like, get to this whole film, those scenes felt alive to me. Those scenes felt like good. They felt they had this energy, this performance energy that a lot of cartoons might just feel a little flawed, or like they're just animating to a song, or, you know, like essentially a music video, right? But this felt like like organic. The music came first and they were animating to the music and not vice versa. Yeah, I totally agree. It feels really organic, you know, definitely those music performance scenes, even the girl on the stairs talking to him and like playing the trombone and going off, like it feels really organic. Which was, by the way, a fantastic scene. Yeah, that was really good. That was, you know, Pixar movies, they're emotional. They get you emotional. I don't know how much this one got you emotional. It got me very emotional. I got choked several times. Yeah, I got choked up. I didn't cry during the movie, but thinking back on it as the credits were rolling and some stuff that happened, like I did shed a few tears. Nice. And that was a scene that got me pretty choked up. Yeah, I think that's one of the best scenes in the movie, for sure. It's like that little girl talking herself into not quitting. Beautiful. Yeah, and I think the biggest moment for me, there's that one, and then him escorting her to Earth and saying, you know, she's scared. Yeah, holding her hand. And he's like, I'm going to go with you. I'll hold your hand. And she's like, well, you can't go. And he's like, but I'll go as far as I can. Yeah, there's a real maturity in his character that you're almost like, you get choked up and moved just kind of witnessing him mature and like accept it finally, right? Like, it's over. My life is over. It's done. And that's why I think it would have been, you know, maybe this doesn't need to be the focus, but I think there would have been something really nice and maybe expected, and maybe I shouldn't be disappointed that it wasn't there, but about him realizing his ability as a mentor, because this is the child that can't be mentored properly, that can't be given the spark, and somehow he is able to do it. And I would like a little bit more concreteness of that realization that, like, I am a teacher. Yeah, like, me too. That's me. That's kind of what I'm saying. You know, I focused in on the Lisa element of the whole thing earlier, but like his inspiration to teach and how that inspires him and makes him feel full. I would have liked a little bit more of that sprinkled throughout the movie as well, right? A little bit of like the stuff that he arrives at the end of the movie concluding that actually filled up his life. I would have liked maybe a little scenes of him at the beginning being inherently good at those things. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe they don't do that because it might muddy up the message, because the message is don't focus on a purpose, because that's not what life is about. Right. Life is about all the in-between moments and the little things, you know? Right. Like and what I'm asking for is maybe him at the beginning not appreciating those things as well as he could be, thinking about jazz, and then later when he goes back to those scenes being like, oh man, I was a fool, you know? But that's just asking for a lot from a movie. So yeah, I mean, to me, I got enough of that from the scene where he spreads out all of the stuff that she collected on the piano and tosses his sheet music aside and just flows and gets in the moment. Right, cool. There you go. I got enough of that, but I could see wanting more concrete. I understand. Yeah, that. I think I just wanted stuff from his life previously and not his life since he met her. 22. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I think that concludes my thoughts for Soul. What do you think? It includes all my biggest ones and all the ones I'm willing to share that aren't so super personal. All right. And deep, you know? Yeah. No, this isn't the place for that. Yeah, that's for my therapist. Yeah, there you go. Your therapist, or at least your wife. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right, well, so I think we're done, right? Yeah, we are done. Okay. Cool. So thank you so much, Mike, for talking to me about Soul and Mandalorian and Wonder Woman and other things. Yeah, and everything in between, the end of the effing world or the fucking world. I don't know. Jury's out still. But yes, thank you so much as well, listener, for listening. And then thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch. All right, stay tuned to this channel. Next week, we should be doing our next Casually Criterion over Some Like It Hot. And that should be the return of the Christopher Reeves. That's right. I don't get to do the intros no more. I know. Which is a shame. It's, you know, you kind of just got into your swing, you know? I did. I was really feeling it. Yeah, but
Oh, well.
Best let the professionals take over when they get back.
That's right. Chris brings that energy.
Yes, he does.
All right. Well, I guess with that, we'll talk to you guys next time.
All right. See you later.
Bye.